The sky over the Serengeti cracked in half with the sound of a sonic boom. Dust spiraled up from the ground as a sleek, obsidian craft descended silently into a clearing. Zebras scattered. Wildebeests galloped away. But the lion didn't move. It lay sprawled beneath an acacia tree, one paw grotesquely twisted, chest heaving with labored breaths, golden eyes glazed with pain. Inside the ship, the lights dimmed to a soft green. Instruments blinked, displaying data in a language no Earth scientist could parse. Standing at the helm, Virex adjusted the collars of his sterile apron. He blinked once, then twice, his vertical pupils narrowing as he examined the animal on the monitor. Quadruped mammal, he said aloud, voice translating through his implant. Severely injured. Unknown species. Possibly apex predator. High risk. From the back of the ship, a voice called out, "You've patched up volcanic lizards on Draxos 4, you'll be fine." Virex did not respond. He collected his field kit, antiseptics, tissue fusers, bone stabilizers, and stepped into the decontamination chamber. Moments later, he emerged in the clearing, the ship sealing behind him with a soft hiss. The lion turned its head slightly as Virex approached. It did not growl. It didn't have the energy. Virex knelt beside it. No visible parasites. Left forelimb dislocated and fractured. Puncture wounds on flank. Possibly from territorial conflict. He reached for the stabilizer. A low voice came from behind a nearby outcrop. "Don't touch him yet." Virex froze. From the rocks emerged a tall man in a sun-faded ranger vest, khaki pants stained with dust and blood. His right hand held a tranquilizer rifle. His left arm hung oddly at his side, fingers swollen and purple. "Step back," the man said. "He's not fully out." "I detected no neurological activity consistent with aggression," Virex replied calmly. "Yeah? Trust me, you haven't met a lion waking up from a dart. Especially one that size." The man limped forward, sweat beading on his brow. He squatted next to the lion, gently placing a hand behind its ear. "Easy, big guy." Virex watched in silence. After a minute, the man exhaled. "Okay. Now you can start." "I am Virex of the Ilari Medica," the alien said. "I was directed here by an emergency subspace relay." "You are the human veterinarian?" The man wiped his brow. "Steven Harrow. Wildlife rescue, mostly. I wasn't expecting company." Virex tilted his head. "Neither was I. Your planet's fauna is chaotic." Steven laughed faintly. Then winced. "Broke my wrist getting him out of a poacher's snare. Thought he was done for." Virex scanned him briefly. "You require medical attention." Steven waved him off. "Later. Start with him. He's not gonna last another hour." Virex knelt beside the lion again, scanning the leg. Compound fracture. Internal bleeding. Infection risk high. Steven glanced at the lion's eyes. "He's a fighter. Been through worse." Virex injected a local anesthetic into the lion's shoulder, then began working. The bone stabilizer clicked into place. Tissue repair gel hissed softly as he applied it to the wounds. He worked efficiently, occasionally glancing at Steven, who had sat back against a tree trunk, cradling his wrist. After nearly an hour, Virex stood. Stabilization complete. He should survive. Steven nodded. "Thanks." Virex looked at the man for a moment. "You place the needs of this creature above your own." Steven chuckled. "Yeah, that's kind of the job description." "You are illogical," Virex said. "Welcome to Earth." The lion stirred, eyes fluttering open. It lifted its head, tested its leg, and let out a low growl. But it didn't rise. Instead, it rested its head on its paws and exhaled deeply. Virex observed silently. Steven leaned over and whispered, "Just another house cat, right?" Virex did not understand the joke. A few minutes later, Steven tried to stand and nearly collapsed. Virex caught him. "You will not refuse treatment this time." "All right," Steven muttered. "Fine. Wrist feels like it's full of broken glass anyway." Virex helped him into the ship, which adjusted its internal atmosphere subtly for the human's comfort. Steven squinted at the alien technology blinking on every surface. "Looks like a spaceship built by IKEA." "IKEA?" Virex asked. "Never mind." The medbay scanned Steven's wrist. Virex examined the display. Distal radius fractured. You will require immobilization and physical therapy. Yeah, sounds about right. Virex applied a bone aligner and wrapped the wrist in a carbon fiber brace. Do not use this hand for at least 1 Earth week. Steven looked down at the brace. So I'm grounded. Grounded means I can't go back out there. There are others who can perform your function? Steven hesitated. Not really. Not like I do. Virex was silent for a moment. Then you must recover. Efficiently. Outside, the lion had risen to its feet. It limped slowly through the clearing, nose twitching. Then it paused, turned, and looked directly at the ship. Steven watched through the window. He'll be all right. You formed a bond? Of course I did. You spend enough time dragging a 300-pound predator out of a snare, you get attached. Virex processed this. Strange. Steven smiled. Maybe to you. The next day, Virex accompanied Steven to the edge of the brushline. The lion had not gone far. It lay on a shaded knoll, watching them closely. He's keeping an eye on you, Virex said. Or deciding whether I'd make a light snack. That would be unwise. Your flesh is low in nutrient density. Steven raised an eyebrow. Gee, thanks. Virex adjusted the scanner on his wrist. Local fauna in this sector continue to trigger medical alerts. I may remain longer. Steven looked at him. You're planning to stay? For now. Well, I hope you've got a tent. I have a mobile habitat module. Fancy tent. Got coffee? No. Steven sighed. We'll fix that. Virex tilted his head. You intend to improve my provisions? You're helping us. Least I can do. The lion yawned, stretched, and settled back into the grass. Steven turned to Virex. You ever treated a cheetah? No. Great. Because there's one with a limp about 5 clicks west. Virex blinked. You are injured. You cannot travel. I can drive. You are grounded. Steven grinned slightly. Yeah? Let's see how grounded I really am. Virex shook his head. Humans are dangerously stubborn. Welcome to Earth, Steven repeated. They headed for the vehicle, Steven favoring his good arm, Virex adjusting his kit. Behind them, the lion watched quietly, golden eyes unblinking, until the truck rumbled out of sight. By late afternoon, the sun had turned the sky into a copper haze. The truck bounced over dry ridges and through narrow trails, its tires kicking up thin veils of red dust. Steven drove with one hand, the other strapped against his chest in a sling Virex insisted he wear. The alien sat in the passenger seat, knees pressed awkwardly against the dashboard, trying to make sense of the glove compartment that had opened itself mid-drive and spilled out a collection of faded field maps, a broken flashlight, and something that looked suspiciously like a dried lizard tail. This compartment serves no structural purpose, yet it is filled with refuse. Steven shifted gears. It's not refuse. That's all field-critical material. You possess multiple torn atlases and a corroded battery set. Exactly. That's my backup navigation system. Virex watched as Steven steered around a fallen log with 2 fingers. Human reliance on decaying materials is statistically unwise. Tell that to duct tape. I have already reviewed its specifications. Its popularity is inexplicable. A low chirp sounded from a small transceiver wedged between the seat cushions. Steven grabbed it with his working hand. Yeah? A woman's voice crackled through. Eyes on that cheetah you mentioned. He's limping worse now. East of the watering hole. Moving slow. Copy that, Steven said. We're en route. Virex adjusted a sensor band around his wrist. Based on directionality, we should reach the location in 16 minutes. You are exceeding safe acceleration. You're calculating speed in your head? It is a basic function. Steven raised his eyebrows but didn't comment. They continued along the trail until the terrain narrowed into a shallow ravine, where the truck had to slow to a crawl. Thorny bushes scraped against the doors. Somewhere nearby, a bird shrieked once, then fell silent. When they reached the clearing, the cheetah was resting near a termite mound, panting heavily. It barely lifted its head when the truck eased to a stop. Steven killed the engine. That's not good. He's not alert. Virex had already exited the vehicle, scanning the animal from a distance with a small handheld array. Rear right leg appears compromised. No visible lacerations. Possible ligament tear. Steven slid out and squatted carefully, favoring his side. He's been pushing too hard. Probably ran from something. Hyenas, maybe. They don't give up easy. Virex stepped closer. Approach will require sedation. I will administer. Steven held up a hand. Wait, let me try something. He approached slowly, stopping just outside the cheetah's periphery. The animal turned its head slightly but didn't move otherwise. Steven crouched lower. Hey, buddy. No sudden moves. All right? Virex remained still, observing. The cheetah's sides rose and fell quickly. Steven took out a small pouch from his vest. Chunks of dried meat. He tossed one gently near the cheetah's paws. It didn't react. That's bad, Steven muttered. He's burning through reserves. Virex moved beside him. I will administer a sedative now. His metabolic indicators are deteriorating. Steven nodded. Go ahead. The alien's injector hissed softly as he fired a microdart into the cheetah's hindquarters. The animal flinched, then slowly relaxed, eyelids drooping. Give it 30 seconds, Virex said. Steven took a breath and looked around. We'll need to get him loaded into the bed. Can your ship handle temporary animal containment? My vessel has a biological stasis pod. It can maintain vitals and immobilize movement, but it is calibrated for smaller life forms. How much smaller? Up to 90 kilograms. Steven eyed the cheetah. He's pushing 75, maybe 80. Should fit barely. They hoisted the animal between them using a makeshift tarp. Virex handled the bulk of the weight, his frame surprisingly efficient at lifting. Steven guided the cheetah's limbs to avoid pressure on the injured leg. Back at the ship, the pod hummed to life as soon as the cheetah was secured inside. Virex adjusted the containment field until the animal's breathing stabilized. Ligament strain. Mild tearing across the knee joint. No fractures, he said. Rehab. Yes, I will synthesize a support brace and initiate tissue regeneration therapy. Full recovery within 14 Earth days. Steven leaned against the wall, sweat soaking through his collar. You're fast. Virex turned to him. You should hydrate. Your internal temperature is elevated. There's a cooler in the truck. I will retrieve it. He returned moments later carrying a dented plastic box, which he set down with a clunk. Steven opened it and grabbed a bottle. Warm as bathwater. Still better than nothing. Virex opened another compartment and produced a sealed packet. This is a nutrient supplement. Flavorless but efficient. Steven examined the packet. You guys ever heard of spices? We eliminated them. They contributed no measurable benefit to sustenance. Steven unscrewed the cap on his bottle. I'm starting to think your species just hates joy. Virex glanced back at the cheetah. We do not categorize emotional states that way. Figures. That evening, the two of them set up temporary shelter under the ship's wing. The sky above them was streaked with stars, and distant calls echoed across the plains. Steven sat on a folding camp stool, his wrist brace resting on his knee. So, what made you sign up for galactic vet duty? Virex adjusted a field monitor beside him. My people require service rotations on developing worlds. I selected this sector for its biological volatility. Volatility? Unpredictable species behavior. Fluctuating environmental hazards. Complex predator-prey dynamics. You mean chaos? Functionally, yes. Steven chuckled. Bet you didn't think you'd be hauling a cheetah into a spaceship on day 2. I did not anticipate a planetary biome so dependent on individual humans. Steven leaned back. That's kind of how things end up here. You wait around for someone else to fix it and nothing gets fixed. Virex was quiet for a moment. I reviewed your medical records. Steven frowned. You what now? Your arm was broken previously. 5 years ago. Same bone. Motorbike crash. Back tire slid out. Why did you not undergo corrective surgery? Didn't have time. Had a whole breeding group of wild dogs needing relocation. That is not a rational decision. Nope. But they're still alive. Virex adjusted the monitor again. You categorize risk differently than any sentient species I've encountered. We call it picking your battles. Your species appears determined to fight all of them. Steven rubbed his temples. Yeah, well, someone's got to. They sat in silence for a while. Crickets chirped. Something rustled through the grass nearby, but never came close. Virex finally stood. The cheetah will remain in stasis overnight. I will monitor remotely. You should rest. Steven pointed at the camp cot. You planning on sleeping in that? My posture is adjustable. I don't doubt it. The next morning, just after sunrise, Virex was already running diagnostics. Steven stirred awake with a groan, rolling off the cot and stretching his back. Tell me the brace stayed on him. It did. The cheetah's vitals have improved. I will begin mobility therapy this afternoon. Steven pulled on his boots. We should take him to the sanctuary once he's stable enough. They've got open terrain and minimal predator contact. Virex nodded. I will accompany you. Steven raised an eyebrow. You ever ridden in a cargo bed with an animal before? No. Well, you're in for a treat. Virex tilted his head slightly. Is this treat edible? Steven laughed once, then winced. No. It's just uncomfortable and smells like old meat. Your idioms are misleading. That's half the fun. By mid-morning, they had the cheetah out of the pod and resting on a padded stretcher. Steven guided Virex through the loading process, pointing out where to place pressure and how to avoid the animal's tail, which twitched periodically in irritation. Once secured, they rolled out slowly, dust trailing behind them like smoke. Steven glanced over. You know, if you stick around long enough, you'll probably end up treating more humans than animals. I will prepare accordingly. You might want to bring more of those bone aligner things. I have 73 units. Steven blinked. That might actually be enough. They drove on into the heat shimmer, the plains opening wide ahead of them and the cheetah breathing steadily behind. By early afternoon, the cheetah was resting in a shaded enclosure at the wildlife sanctuary, lying on a bed of straw with a cool mist system keeping the heat at bay. His injured leg was secured in a soft brace, and he blinked slowly whenever Steven or Virex passed by the open gate. Steven leaned against a sun-warmed support beam, sipping from a cracked thermos. He's settling better than I thought. Virex stood beside the enclosure, watching the cheetah without blinking. His cortisol levels are lower than earlier. Adaptation underway. Always amazes me how fast they come down when they realize they're safe. You perform this work without consistent institutional support, Virex said. Your equipment is outdated. Your resources are insufficient. Yet outcomes remain unusually favorable. Steven wiped his brow with a shirt sleeve. That's a polite way of saying, your setup is held together with dental floss and hope. I was unaware dental floss had structural applications. It doesn't, but hope somehow does. A heavy-set woman with sun-darkened skin and a clipboard walked up from the clinic's rear entrance. Steven, I got your message. This the cheetah from the watering hole. Steven nodded. Yeah. Rear leg strain. We braced him, started hydration. He's stable. She glanced at Virex, then back at Steven. This your new assistant? Something like that. Virex, this is Dr. Miriam Catry. She oversees the sanctuary. Virex extended a hand with 3 long fingers. Miriam shook it without hesitation. Appreciate you stepping in, she said. We've been stretched thin. Haven't had a vet on site since Marius left for Namibia. I am not legally permitted to practice medicine on humans, Virex said. That's probably for the best, Miriam said. Steven chuckled. He's all right. Bit literal. Saved a lion yesterday. Miriam raised an eyebrow. You're still doing field runs with a torn ligament? It's just a fracture this time. She gave him a look that didn't require words. I know, Steven said. I'll stay out of the bush until it heals. Miriam turned to Virex. You planning to stay long? My mission parameters have shifted. I am authorized to remain while biological anomalies persist. Miriam gave a short nod. You'll find plenty of that here. Later, in the sanctuary's modest treatment room, Steven sat on the counter while Virex adjusted the brace on his wrist. The swelling had gone down slightly, but bruising had spread to the base of his thumb. You ignored pain symptoms for over 38 hours, Virex said, rotating the joint gently. I've had worse. That is not a viable medical benchmark. Steven winced. Doesn't mean it's not true. You have scar tissue from at least 7 prior injuries on this limb alone. 8, if you count the time I got bit by a macaque. Virex paused. What is a macaque? Tiny monkey. Big attitude. You allowed it to bite you? I didn't allow anything. He was offended by my hat. Virex resecured the brace. Your species engages with danger frequently, often without necessity. Maybe, but we also fix what we break. You repair each other with insufficient tools and inconsistent outcomes. Steven hopped off the counter. Yeah, but sometimes we make it work anyway. Outside, the sun had begun to dip. Long shadows stretched across the compound as staff moved between enclosures, checking on animals and logging data. A silver transport hovered quietly beyond the gate, its engines humming at idle. Virex stood watching a pair of orphaned jackals chase each other around a tire swing. They will be released? Eventually, Steven said. Once they learn to hunt on their own. And if they do not, then they live here. Not ideal, but better than starving. Virex didn't respond. Steven walked over to a rusting shed and grabbed a battered first aid kit. He flipped it open on a workbench and began replacing what had been used in the field. Gauze, antiseptic, splints. You didn't have to come out here, he said without looking up. Could have just patched that cheetah and gone back to orbit. You require continued monitoring. I'm not your patient. No. But you are statistically likely to re-injure yourself. Steven smiled faintly. Fair. Virex watched him organize the kit. You have no formal staff, no consistent funding, yet you manage multiple species with complex medical needs. It's not just me. Miriam keeps this place running. Volunteers come through. We piece it together. Your methods are structurally unsound. Probably, but we're still here. Virex tilted his head. Persistence in the absence of resources. Illogical, yet effective. Steven looked up. That's pretty much humanity in a nutshell. That night, they shared a meal on the back step of the clinic. Miriam had brought out a pot of lentils and rice, and the 3 of them ate quietly while crickets chirped in the grass beyond the fence. Afterward, Steven stood and stretched carefully. I'm heading to the bunkhouse. Wrist stiff. Your brace should be removed overnight, Virex said. I will assist. Steven hesitated. You don't need to follow me everywhere. You are prone to disregarding medical advice. Steven sighed. Fine. Inside the bunkhouse, the air was cool. The lights flickered slightly, solar panels hadn't stored enough charge. Steven sat on the edge of the cot while Virex unfastened the brace. The skin beneath was discolored, the swelling having spread near the elbow. You're thorough, Steven said. You are an ongoing anomaly. I remain cautious. Steven flexed his fingers. That's fair. Virex repacked his instruments. You should avoid lifting for at least 5 more days. I'll try. You will fail. Steven didn't argue. The next morning, just after sunrise, the cheetah took his first steps without the brace. Miriam guided him into a larger enclosure where he limped briefly, then began testing his weight more evenly. Virex observed silently. Recovery is progressing faster than projected. Steven leaned on the fence. He wants to move. That's half the battle. They watched as the cheetah stretched, then lay down again in the grass. A second cheetah paced along the outer edge of the enclosure, watching curiously. Miriam crossed her arms. We'll try introducing them next week. If they bond, we can release them together. Steven nodded. Better odds that way. Virex didn't speak for a moment. You're going to leave soon, Steven said. My ship has received updated directives. The anomaly threshold has decreased significantly. Intervention is no longer mandated. Steven exhaled through his nose. Figures. You have additional cases pending? Always. You will continue despite injury? Of course. Virex stepped back. Then I will remain for 2 more cycles. Steven blinked. I thought your orders changed. They did. But my presence remains optional. And I prefer to monitor my mistakes. Steven grinned. You're not a bad medic, you know? You are a suboptimal patient. Fair trade. They stood together, watching the cheetah nap peacefully in the shade. Miriam joined them a moment later. We've got a call about a pangolin caught in a wire trap. You up for another run? Steven looked at Virex. What do you think? Virex adjusted his kit. Pangolins possess keratin scales. I have not treated one. Then let's go introduce you. They climbed back into the truck. The engine coughed once, then settled into a rhythmic growl. As they rolled out of the compound, the cheetah lifted his head briefly, then returned to his nap. The road ahead shimmered with heat and motion. Another rescue, another wound, another stubborn human refusing to rest. And beside him, an alien who stayed anyway.